Professor Thomas Goldsby, who is a chair in logistics at the Haslam College of Business at the University of Tennessee-Knoxsville, joins us here on The Debrief to talk about the deal and what it means. Professor, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Doing well, John. Appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Thank you for coming on. And I think everybody breathed a sigh of relief that the deal was agreed to. And I understand it's not official. So before we talk about what's in the deal and everything like that, what needs to happen before this deal officially becomes real?
Right. So Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters president, is going to bring the deal back to his membership. We knew that yesterday was going to be a pivotal day. It had been 20 days since they were last at the negotiating table. And of course, we were getting to be inside of a week of that 5-year agreement ceasing. But right about high noon yesterday, U.S. Eastern Time, Sean O'Brien emerged from the meeting. Carol Tomei, also the CEO of UPS, emerged from that meeting declaring that it was a win-win-win outcome. And certainly it seems like the Teamsters did quite well. And based upon the brief interaction I had with my own UPS driver this morning, there seems to be some warm reception in the early going to what they're hearing. We do expect this agreement to be widely supported by the membership. And that means in about 3 weeks' time, when this vote closes, and frankly, it'll be official at that time, but I don't think any of us consumers or businesses are going to witness any change other than maybe bigger, broader smiles on behalf of the UPS workers as they show up your home or workplace.
Yeah, happier driver dropping off your packages. Are you surprised that it actually got finished a week before the deadline? It seems as though in cases like this that both sides walk things up right to the finish line and like to look out over the edge of the cliff before both deciding not to jump. That didn't seem to be the case this time.
Well, it really was coming pretty close to the brink. And I'll have to admit, most industry observers like myself expected it to work out just as you suggested, John, that there would not be any signing of deals, weeks in advance. It really needed to go out to near the finish line. But I'll have to admit, some of us were getting pretty nervous, given that it had been about 20 days since they had last negotiated. In fact, the Teamsters kind of stormed away from the table, even though there were suggestions that they were 95% there toward the deal. They were still holding out for part-time worker wages, pretty substantial ones at that. And going into yesterday's meeting, some of us got a little bit nervous, knowing that if they were not going to tie things up yesterday, there was a good chance they might storm from the table. And again, it takes time for these agreements to get vetted among the membership. And so really, if they didn't strike a deal yesterday, or reach a deal, I should say, yesterday, there was some high propensity for strike, even if it was a few days or a few weeks in duration. If they didn't strike a deal yesterday, I think many of us would have been walking back our assertions that there would be no strike.
So, Professor, what are the major things, the major points that the two sides have agreed on? What are the big differences in this agreement compared to the one 5 years ago?
Well, certainly wages across the board, full-time workers, part-time workers. There was something called a 2-tier wage system that was very contentious. Sean O'Brien himself was very vocal about wanting to get rid of that 2-tier system, where these part-time workers that only work really during the week, they have considerably shorter hours and fewer responsibilities, but there was a dramatic drop in wages there. He wanted to rectify that. It seems like that was done. Something that was really noteworthy to me was how hard the Teamsters fought on behalf of part-timers. Now, granted, by some estimations, that represents about 60% of the Teamsters workforce at UPS. So that's a lion's share of the workforce. But often unions are trying to migrate workers from part-time and certainly temporary workers to full-time. And so it was really noteworthy to me to say there's some acceptance, certainly, of that part-time workforce, but trying to elevate the wages and benefits they receive. Certainly, full-time workers are also going to benefit considerably in wages, benefits, holiday pay, things like that. But it was also the non-economic considerations that drew a lot of attention. About a month ago, we were all intrigued with the air conditioning provision, right? And you see those UPS brown trucks. By the way, that's a patented color, UPS brown. No other business can use that color brown, but it's dark, and right? And those workers are wearing that same UPS brown outfit. It gets incredibly hot behind the wheel as well as in that package truck, moving and grabbing those packages and taking them to the doorsteps. And so the provision of air conditioning is pretty substantial. Going to be carry a pretty hefty price tag as well in new trucks that they buy starting in 2024, and also equipping existing trucks with fans. But some of the drivers I've heard say, hey, the fans aren't going to help but just circulate the hot air that's already making their way into the cab. I think they like the AC to be pervasive throughout the entire fleet. But there were a number of things, economic to the tone that Sean O'Brien was saying that he got $30 billion in concessions, which is very substantial over the course of that 5-year agreement. Other insiders say it's probably closer to 20 billion, but we all agree it's going to be a pretty hefty sum.
Now, obviously, UPS is going to be paying more to drivers, and anytime there's a company that's putting out more money, that's paying more to its employees, you wonder if that's going to affect the prices that you pay for things, that the consumer pays, the listener will pay for things. What are some of the ripple effects from this agreement? Could it cost more for us to ship through UPS? Could it cost more for businesses to ship through UPS? How will some of these costs be passed on to the consumer, the business?
Yeah, I think so. There's just not going to be any way for them to absorb these price increases. They're considerably higher operating expense that they're going to face and still meet shareholder needs. And so we do believe that the pricing will carry over to the market, to businesses and consumers. Every fall, UPS, FedEx, and other carriers in that industry issue what are called GRIs, general rate increases. Last year, UPS and FedEx issued 6.9%. General rate increases. And frankly, it had many of us scratching our heads because we were seeing the freight volumes softening. And so we're wondering where they would merit a price increase like that. Now, granted, those are not the prices that big shipping companies are going to pay to work with the likes of UPS and FedEx. They're going to negotiate substantial discounts on those rates. But to the general public and smaller companies, they would face those increases. Well, we're a few months out from UPS issuing their next GRI, and we're expecting, if it was 6.9% last year, what's it going to be this year? And there's also the belief that they're not going to be able to fully absorb the increased costs with a GRI. So what we're really expecting is UPS to become even more selective of the customers they work with. We've seen this pivot over the last couple of years under CEO Carol Tomé, where they have stiff-armed some of the less lucrative corners of the market. And it would be business to consumer shipping, a lot of that household delivery stuff. You might have noticed, in fact, that UPS is coming to your door less often now than they were 1, 2, 3 years ago. And that's because they're choosing to work more with businesses in areas like healthcare and automotive, where they can get those higher prices. And we expect that strategy to only further coming out of this agreement.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right. I mostly see FedEx, or I see Amazon trucks, or even some independent folks who are delivering for those different carriers. So I hadn't really noticed that before, but I think you're right on the money about that for sure. And so I guess now the question is, the Teamsters, they got this big deal for UPS. What's next? What group is next needing to agree to a new contract that the Teamsters are going to try and work this same magic with?
Well, there's certainly many other parties in the transportation and logistics space. Over the last few weeks, we've been watching very closely what's been going on with Yellow Freight, which is one of the 3 largest less than truckload carriers. They've threatened to strike at Yellow. They've also been facing some very difficult financial circumstances. Looks like they are going to get saved by the bell because of some last minute funding that's going to keep them operating a bit longer. But I suspect in that less than truckload segment, which is where the Teamsters are rather prominent, they're going to step up the fight there. But we're really keeping a close eye on Amazon. Amazon has been quite effective thus far in fending off organization of their workforce. You might have heard in various pockets around the country where specific locations have attempted to organized and issued votes even. But we all took note when the Teamsters opened an Amazon division
Mm.
dedicated to trying to get that monolithic company organized, and we expect there to be significant overtures. And given what the Teamsters gained, and so publicly, if you will, out of this most recent negotiation with UPS, we do expect there to be some inroads, if you will. It's not to suggest that it will necessarily happen today, tomorrow, next year, but we expect there to be some pretty significant inroads with trying to get that massive workforce at Amazon on board.
Well, that is certainly a story to watch, and moving forward, we'll be keeping tabs on that as well, and we'll be calling you back when we when we have a story like this that's coming before us. In terms of the package delivery and logistics industry, how strong a position is labor in right now, especially seeing as how they were able to avoid a strike here with the deadline still a few days away?
Well, labor is certainly in the driver's seat, given that there's so much more demand for transportation and warehousing and simply not enough workforce out there. And we're talking about unemployment rates nationwide, 3.5, 3.6%. It is much lower in this segment. There is not a transportation and logistics company in the nation that is not looking for more employees to either handle those parcels in a warehouse or to deliver them over the road. And for all the talk of automation and robotization, we're going to still need people to do that work into the foreseeable future. I think it's many years off before we see autonomous trucks. And even then, you're going to need someone probably to bring that item right to the door. So drones, wheeled robots, all that stuff, a lot of experimentation, but I see a lot of restrictions in place legislatively to prevent that from becoming the mainstay for meeting these business needs.
Professor Thomas Goldsby, Chair in Logistics at the Haslam College of Business at the University of Tennessee-Knoxsville. Professor, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it.